Hi, this is the Module 12 video, and you do not have to read Chapter 12 Spring in the Spring book. If you want to read it, you can. It's an interesting chapter um, for you guys, I think, especially because your generation, obviously, you're dealing with social media and with um, all kinds of new outlets for that, new venues for that. I mean, it's a whole new world out there. I can't keep up with it myself and with my children, but it's an interesting look at the history of schools and media and popular culture and how they all sort of interconnect and advertising and these types of things. So I'm not going to make you read that chapter, but I do have a prepared PowerPoint for it, and there's a lot of interesting visuals on there that you should hopefully find very interesting. And there is I think out of all of it, the very last slide of the PowerPoint is probably the most significant one, and that one basically talks about different conceptions of youth and of childhood, and this whole idea of this protected childhood, okay, that comes about after World War II. All right, this comes about after World War II, where your childhood should just be innocent and free and all. It's really ahistorical. I mean, women were always in the workforce for various reasons because they didn't have enough money. Families didn't have enough money. Even if people lived on farms, women were working. It's not like they were doting on their children 24/7. So this idea of the stay-at-home mom comes about after World War II, and it makes sense because post World War II, you really there was sort of a push to put all of these soldiers back into the workforce. And so a lot of women had to leave jobs that they were pursuing and having to do during World War II. So, this plays out in giving this sort of idea that there's this protected childhood that we still kind of go back to. We still sort of have this idea, oh, look what's happened, to childhood today. Look what's happened to what children have to deal with today. And in the 60s and 70s, the previous generation sort of rebels against this whole idea of the protected childhood for various reasons, and they become, and what Spring argues is that now there's this whole idea of a prepared childhood that takes over. And you'll see a little bit of that, I think, in the PowerPoint. But, for various reasons, economic reasons, it becomes a world where both parents have to work in a lot of communities, in a lot of areas, for many people. And as that ends up happening, and then, of course, as a result of the women's movement and of equal rights and all of these types of things that happen in the 70s, many women do go back into the workforce and then demand better pay. They demand equal rights. They demand all kinds of things that go along with having to be back in the workforce. Anyway, so you'll see a little bit of that in the PowerPoint, but there's also some really interesting just ideas about teenagers as a market, as an advertising group to target things at, and and our consumer society and these types of things. So it's pretty interesting. Ravitch, chapter 9, she recalls a teacher that she loved in high school, and it's called What Would Mrs. Ratliff Do? And what she's really targeting in this chapter is the idea of what we want teachers to be today versus traditionally what teachers have been. And her whole argument is really that, what we're demanding of teachers today doesn't really promote what she considers to be a good teacher. Is the skill set required? If we're so concerned about raising test scores, what kind of a person is going to be successful in that scenario? What kind of a person goes into teaching saying, ooh, I can't wait to get in there so I can increase test scores by 10% every year? That's not why we go into teaching. So is the skill set the same for raising test scores versus actually being a good teacher and connecting with children? Now, I know it seems like they should be, and certainly one would hope that if you build a rapport, if you inspire children, if you really help them learn, that it will be reflected in the test scores. But when the test scores are the only thing that matters, and we completely remove teacher judgment, professional judgment of any kind, the human element, what's happening. And is it really what we want our school systems to turn into? And then she does discuss as well this accountability of the value added model, and how we're holding, the new push to hold teachers responsible based on student test scores, which again seems, okay, that seems, legitimate. Of course, if you're a good teacher, you can help increase test scores for children. But she gives a good argument as to why there are problems with these models that a lot of people, economists, have come up with to try and regulate this and to try and actually measure this. It's almost impossible to measure. You can quantify and count Coke bottles at a Coke plant. But Coke bottles don't contribute to their organization. They don't contribute to their production, right? Children contribute to their own knowledge. Okay, it's really almost impossible to work out all of the different things that have to happen in order to really hold teachers accountable based on only test scores. I mean, obviously hold teachers accountable. All teachers, I don't think anybody would argue, sure, hold me accountable, but come into my classroom and see what I'm doing. See what the quality of my lesson plans are, see how I'm addressing the curriculum, see how I'm building a rapport with the students, see what kind of activities I'm, drawing them into. Anyway, let's see, Darling Hammond, chapter 9, your last chapter. You made it through. You made it through Darling Hammond. I like Darling Hammond because she gives a lot of specifics. She really lays out her plan in the last 3 chapters of this book. In chapter 7, she talked about how to make teachers better, and professionalize them and make them prepared. In chapter 8, last time, I think she talked about organizing the system, organizing the institutional structure and individual schools and so forth in order to make them more successful. And in chapter 9, she kind of pulls it all together and she adds policy. She says, listen, if we're going to be successful, we've got to revamp the way that we're doing some of these things. We're going to have to revamp No Child Left Behind and all of the policies related to deprofessionalizing teachers and, just a lot of things that she brings together. But she comes up with, 5 main elements that she really feels need to be worked on in order to improve not just the quality of education in America today, but to improve the equality of access and equality of opportunity, which she talks a lot about in her book. So, that's chapter 9 of Darling Hammond, and then you're done with with her book. And so from now on, you'll only have, we'll have, I think both Ravitch and Spring both go to chapter 15. So you're going to continue to read in those books. And I have a couple of little articles. They're not very long later on, but we'll get to that later. So you're going to have a discussion prompt this time around in Module 12. And then your journal response number 7 is going to deal with Ravitch's ideas about teacher unions and so forth. Let's see. She also discusses TFA, I forgot, Teach for America in that particular chapter. Ravitch does. But anyway, you are going to be turning in your critical issue project next week. Don't panic, I wasn't going to say this week, next week. So make sure you're preparing your research, you're doing your work, you're coming up with your slides for your PowerPoint. Be aware that you are going to be turning that into me, and there's a 1-page handout that goes with it. But you will also be, I don't remember if I make you do it next week or the following week, but you will also be sharing this with your classmates. So just make sure you're aware that I won't be the only one seeing them. So that's it for Module 12, and I will see you in Module 13.